All right, good evening, everybody. We have an update today on our teaching and learning component of the fall opening. And so many members of the Teaching and Learning Department, Angie Miller, Director of Teaching and Learning, and Shannon Gilbert, Director of Inclusive Services, will also be co-presenting. We have other panelists here who have been a part of our steering committees. And Superintendent Dr. Justin Irish, who will be here to be able to answer questions. Today, the purpose of today is to review our instructional materials and give you a little bit of an update of what instruction will look like and student learning will look like this year, and show a day in the life of a student in the fall. We are in Continuous Learning 2.0. So in the spring, we had to everybody, all families, community members, staff members had to make some big changes very quickly. And we had some guidance from the state on what we could and couldn't do. And so now we've had the summer, received additional guidance every week and day. We're getting new and more additional guidance from the state. And so we are deepening our practice. And today we hope to provide you some information on our instructional models and the instructional materials and a day in a life of what students will look like in both of our learning options. We're going to give you the most current information today, and we will continue to update you as we get more details and we make some final decisions on all aspects of the fall opening. I ask that you please hold your questions until after the presentation. And if you have questions, use the question and answer function, and panelists will respond, or at the end, we will also give live responses to some of the questions. We'll do our best to answer all of the questions. Any questions that aren't answered within the time will be added to the FAQ section of our website next week. So we just wanted to give you a brief overview. We have a number of committees that are supporting us in helping to plan for and make decisions as we move forward to prepare for students returning to school in the fall and returning to their learning in the fall. We have a district steering committee, stakeholders committee, and then a community engagement committee. Our priorities for teaching and learning and student instruction is high quality instruction, ensuring that staff are able to focus on instruction and engagement with students and families, and to provide a consistent experience for students and families across the district. Our decisions are grounded in equitable outcomes and the health and safety of all of our staff, family members, and especially our students.
Dr. Clifford, there's a Q&A or a chat that says they're not seeing the PowerPoint, that they're just seeing our pictures and the slides aren't full screen. So sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. It is full screen for me, and
I'm wondering, I could try sharing my screen.
Why don't you share? Yep.
If that might help.
Okay.
Okay, I'll give that a try. And participants, those of you who are in the meeting, again, if you
okay, perfect.
If you still can't see the PowerPoint,
they can see it now.
Okay.
It's probably settings on my computer. Thank you, Angie.
You're so welcome. I'm going to move forward to where I think you were.
Yep. One more. Right at the, and I was perfect right here. Okay, so our timeline is in July and August. We've been continuing to work with internal and external stakeholders to help design and make decisions so that we can provide you as much information and up-to-date information as possible. We also, on Monday, you will receive a Google survey to make a selection on the instructional and learning option, instructional model learning option that you'd like your student to access this year. So please make sure to complete that Google survey. The board will officially vote on our continuous learning plan for the fall and for this year. And then September 14th, we will begin school. And September 17th will be the first kindergarten instructional day. And we can go to the next slide, please. We are making decisions based on, for our ASD hybrid model, based on 6 steps of reopening. Step 1 is that our schools are completely closed and nobody can have access to the schools. Step 6 is when we're back 5 days a week, back in session as we were before COVID. We're intending to start at step 3. This is where students with the greatest need of additional supports based on a set criteria will be able to be participating on-site in person for up to 2 days, and the remainder of students will access their instruction and learning in a remote or distance learning environment. There's also step 4, which will be additionally adding our youngest learners, such as our kindergarteners, to join and be in person on site for up to 2 days a week, while the rest of the students will be accessing distance learning. Step 5 is when all students will be able to participate in person up to 2 days a week for accessing their instruction. Next slide, please. So we have 2 learning options for the fall. And ASD hybrid is a phased-in approach to eventual in-person learning, as you could see by the different steps, taught by our ASD teachers, and there will be consistent and familiar curriculum, which we'll share a little bit more information on in the next few slides. ASD at home is another learning option, and that's where students will learn at home for the entire school year, supported by ASD teachers, and parents or guardians are the coach of students in their learning. There is a consistent virtual curriculum that the district pays for so that students can access standard aligned curriculum and state standard aligned assessments. We'll also share more information on that in the next few slides. Okay, Angie.
All right, so I believe this is my part. So I'm gonna take over for a few minutes, and I'm gonna spend some time explaining and giving you some details about the ASD hybrid model. So this model is hybrid because we, as you know, we are starting the school year for almost all students or all students virtually. But the idea is that there will be a hybrid approach to phased in-person learning. So this model again is taught by our teachers, and I'm gonna give you some details about the curriculum as well as some draft thinking around schedules for the hybrid model. For all of our grade levels, pre-K-12, students will be engaging with curriculum that was adopted by the district as core curriculum, and we are working hard to convert that to a very usable digital format. We are also going to be implementing some new tools to help us align that curriculum with a virtual setting. Our secondary schools, which is middle school and high school, will also have the ability to incorporate in some components of the Edmentum curriculum in their courses. So this is just a picture of what we mean when we say district adopted familiar curriculum. Our elementary schools have been using for the past several years Eureka Math as their math curriculum, their main math curriculum in person. We'll be utilizing that same curriculum in remote learning in the fall. And we are using we're working hard to convert it to a very user-friendly and simplified in a platform for students to be able to access that curriculum at home with teachers instructing and giving support. Our literacy curriculum has two parts to it. One of those is reading foundational skills. For our earliest learners, that's our foundations curriculum, and that's just another example of familiar curriculum that we're using. Some parts of this will be synchronous and some will be asynchronous. The asynchronous being scheduled away from a teacher, like direct support and live. And yet teachers will be providing support for those times. Some of that will be on a computer or device, and some of it will not be. And so we're going to be intentional about setting up learning opportunities for students that are not on a computer. Some of that could be paper pencil activities, projects, and other things that students are working on at home, supported by teachers. Our foundations curriculum, one of the pictures that's here is of an at-home pack that we'll be purchasing and distributing to all students in our early grades, our primary grades, so that they have the materials they need to do the foundations work. They'll do maybe some of it on a device, but definitely some of it will be off a device. So they'll have letter tiles, they'll have a whiteboard to write on, and some things like that. So we're going to ensure that students have a mix. Our secondary curriculum, these are just two examples of a math curriculum that some secondary teachers might be using. That's a district adopted curriculum. And then, like I said, they will have the opportunity to utilize some of Edmentum courseware's materials in their classes. One reason we decided to go with that as a support for teachers is because there's really good activities and almost a digital textbook of sorts available for some of our courses that teachers are going to be able to utilize to pair with their current course content using that's familiar. This would be completely supported by teachers in our hybrid model. So teachers will be using those materials in their instruction and in their interactions with students. And again, there will be a mix of online or digital content as well as offline and other kinds of content that's not on a computer. So I'm going to show some draft schedules now to give you a picture of like a day in the life and what it would look like. I just want to reiterate, and it's clear that this is a draft. At this point, we are working as a district to fill in the details of these schedules, but this is a sample of an elementary schedule and what the day might look like. So as you can see, we're thinking through teacher tasks and what teachers are engaging in, as well as what the student work would look like. So we have our content parsed out. You know, there's time for math, time for literacy, time for our intentional social emotional learning work, as well as other content areas such as social studies, science, art, music, and physical activity. And so again, some of these times will be synchronous, meaning real time learning, and some of them will be asynchronous, which will allow some flexibility with families in scheduling. We have a similar schedule, and again, this is a draft because we are still working on the details and filling in details, especially for different content areas and how the time might look, but there will be set times for each period in the day. We're currently looking at an alternating schedule where first, third, and fifth period would be one day, and the following day would be second, fourth, and sixth. In this way, teachers would have more chunks of time to work with students in their instruction, as well as students aren't having to, we think it supports families and students in not having to manage all 6 periods every day. And that supports teacher and effective learning, remote learning as well. Our high school schedule looks similar to the middle school, where students will be engaging in more of a block schedule, alternating days between periods. So one day might look like first, third, fifth, and seventh, and another day might have the even numbers 2, 4, 6. You'll notice we have breaks in all the schedules. We recognize that we want students to have those frequent breaks in their work time, whether they're on computers or not. And also we have a good lunchtime period built in every day. Okay. And our Director of Inclusive Services, Shannon Gilbert, is going to speak a little bit to assessment, student supports, and other considerations.
Thank you, Angie. So what we're looking at with assessment this year is many families who have been with Anacortes for a while are familiar with our MAPS testing, and we are adjusting that to iReady this year. MAPS is not built in a way that actually makes itself useful in a hybrid or online environment. It actually requires teachers to log in, a parent or other adult to be with a student, and a whole circumstance of things to be in place in order for that test to be used. So instead, iReady is much more compatible to an online environment. It's actually even a shorter test, so it doesn't take as long for students to do. And there's more capabilities that we can not only get the assessment data we need to look at student growth, but it also has an intervention component that we can use in buildings to help support learning for students that are having difficulties in various areas of math and reading. With our student supports, we are looking at having students phased into a return to, starting with our students with the most high impacted academic and school needs, such as some of our special ed students or students that have needs around language learning and things of that sort. So with those, we're looking at a phased approach. Some students might be back in school at step 3 for a few hours, a couple of days a week, and growing into building them back up into some of that capacity. We're also looking at supports for our high cap and challenge students. In supports for some of those students, it's not so much bringing them into buildings as it is just increasing how much in-depth approach they take to the learning. So it's looking at how we can provide that type of support for those students. Other considerations that we're also taking is we know that we have needs across the district for social emotional learning. That was something that we started to roll out with students last year using Ruler at K through 8. As well as our preschool buildings, and also looking at Character Strong with our high school students. We are working with building teams and staff to continue to integrate that learning into both the hybrid and at-home models of instruction so that we don't lose any of that important work, as well as looking at ways that we can provide some services that are moving from one building to another. Traditionally, we have supports built in where we bring those students in onto campus. They get to take tours, they meet staff, they find out a lot of stuff, they meet students. And with this online environment that we're coming back to, that's not a possibility this year. So we're looking into adjusting that into some online environments. With clubs, athletics, and things of that sort, current instruction from the state and Department of Health has those on hold in terms of having in-person meetings. So we are working with club organizers to build in additional supports for areas where we can actually have those in a hybrid environment. Go ahead, Angie.
All right, I will take this. I'm going to speak to ASD at home. So we can go to the next slide. So ASD at home will still have the same essential learning standards. We have communicated that we have the same platform across the board, but the elementary component of it is called Calvert K5, and the secondary component is called Edmentum, and it serves students from 6th through 12th grade. The teacher is the primary facilitator, supports and coordinates with parents and students, and supports the progress monitoring of students and grading for students. Families are there to support and coach students as they're working through their classes throughout the school day. there is some flexibility in when and how students are accessing their instruction throughout the day and the schedule. So in both the elementary and secondary, the teachers not only will be able to support the platform, but they also have the opportunity to bring in some district curriculum and resources as appropriate and as makes sense for each of the grade level content areas and courses. So in the chat, we're going to include a link to, oh, Angie.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I was gonna get the,
I know you're gonna put the link in there.
So I'll move it right now.
Okay. We'll put the link to the Calvert Learning course catalog and the course catalog for Edmentum. And we'll also post this on the website so that families have access to that. And so those are the main platforms. There is both interactive components to each of these. There's lessons, videos, interactive components at the elementary level. There is some hands-on, offline, paper, pencil work to be done to support student learning so that they're not on the computer the whole time. And Edmentum has both engagement on the platform and their interactive classwork, but also there's some other activities that they do outside of the platform that students are able to research to complete their coursework.
So I am putting, for those of you interested, I am putting the link to the Edmentum course catalog and the Calvert Learning course catalog for K-5 in the chat on the Zoom webinar. So if you're interested, you can find those there.
All right, and if you can go to the next slide, I think we have a video. And Angie, did you, when you uploaded this, I hope that the sound works.
I'm gonna go ahead right now, Dr. Clifford, and share my sound on my computer with the group so that it should work.
Perfect.
Okay.
So here's a video of Edmentum.
Online courses open up a world of opportunity by leveraging a variety of curricula to support flexible implementations for students and educators. Edmentum provides comprehensive, fully customizable online courses designed to meet the needs of all learners. Our content is aligned to national and state standards and built using proven and research-based instructional design. Edmentum courseware offers best-in-class online curriculum with over 400 engaging courses. Courses address a wide range of educational needs, including original credit, credit recovery, career readiness, college readiness, and higher education. Our courseware enhances the way educators utilize data by tracking content mastery and progress to course completion to ensure program goals are met while saving educators valuable time. Whether students are working at grade level, have fallen behind, or are in need of advanced options, Edmentum's curriculum is customizable to each learner's pace and needs. Our award-winning courseware offers a broad range of course subjects, electives, career and technical education, world languages, and advanced courses, all designed to expand student options and provide learning experiences relevant to the real world. Edmentum courseware extends learning beyond the classroom, supporting graduation rates and ensuring college and career readiness.
All right.
Thank you. Before we move to the next slide, that was just a little video to kind of give a little demo of course Edmentum and courseware. Before we move to the next slide, which we'll talk about the supports, actually it's a sample of what a schedule could look like for ASD at home. So one of the things that the teachers may offer, we will consider offering, is a morning meeting so that students and staff, have a connection with the staff. And then have some dedicated times for those instructional supports, phone calls, connections, planning out what the students are going to do for the day and for the week. Here's a possible schedule for students to have lunch. And then staff will also be able to be available for individual student progress monitoring, providing students feedback, and then doing individual student support as needed. The staff will be available during the traditional staff workday. Teachers will be available during the traditional staff workday. However, students can access, they can have a flexible schedule on how they access, when and how they access their instruction during the day. This is a sample of how instruction can be accessed and a sample of how teachers will be available to support students throughout their day at ASD at home. One of the things before we go into the next slide that's going to talk about assessments and student supports, I want to share is that for ASD at home, it's standard aligned curriculum, and it has built-in assessments that are standard aligned. Different than the families that choose to homeschool requirements are needing to meet state-aligned standards, the curriculum, and you also have to make sure that your students are accessing assessments and meeting the state-aligned assessments. So this is providing a digital curriculum that's paid for by the district with teacher support and facilitation on progress monitoring, and built-in assessments that and instruction and curriculum that is standard aligned. And there will be limited flexibility in coordination with the teachers on engagement in some activities in the community. If you can go to the next slide. And I'm going to hand this over to Shannon so that she can give an update on these, this component of ASD at home.
So with the hybrid model, much of that is bringing students back on site and providing supports within buildings and looking at how we can make an adjustment. With the ASD at home, we are looking to provide much of the same supports for students, whether it is that it is a student who receives special education services, it is a student who receives EL services. We want to make sure we can still provide them that whole instruction that they had prior to. It's a matter of looking at it in terms of how many of these students we have within the at-home model. Because parents or guardians are providing the coaching and mentoring support for students and the staff is supporting that, we're working to determine A, how many students this would be, and then B, how many supports that we would plug in. So we aren't taking any of these supports away from students. They just have a little bit of a different look to them because students will not be at home, or sorry, be at school. They'll be learning from an at-home environment with parents and guardians. This is all going to be done in conjunction with the school staff so that parents aren't trying to do this entire lift on their own when there's additional supports and things of that sort that are in place. With the social emotional transition supports, clubs and electives, all of those types of things, again, we are building those into our models. And with the clubs and electives, it's allowing access because the students are still part of ASD, it's still allowing them access to those resources for when we do have a return if they do come back into buildings as a whole. Next slide, Angie. So to support our family learning, we are looking at not only providing staff training and staff supports, but also looking at how we can provide supports to our families. We know that this past spring, there was such a fast transition from being at school to suddenly everybody was at home and trying to learn in this online environment that we want to build in some ways to help parents navigate the systems. So with that, what we're looking at is possibly, not possibly, but we have trainings that we're looking at that may include how to work through and navigate Schoology, which is the platform where different elements of the learning actually get provided out and sent out to students and families. how the instructional and operational guidance and support, so looking at where we can navigate those different environments that we're looking at and how the pieces all fit together between Admentum or Calvert or whatever aspect of it for the parents that they're working with. How to help students navigate tools in this new environment, as well as our video conferencing features. We have been using a lot of Zooms, and that is going to be something that we go to different programming for safety purposes over the course of the school year once we get into that rolling through for school. Go ahead, Angie.
I think this next part of our time tonight with you is to answer some of your questions that you've been asking in the Q&A program. I've been reviewing them and just that I can just answer quickly, and then I'll just ask panelists to, especially Dr. Clifford and Shannon, to weigh in. There was a question about Calvert Learning and whether it's connected to Admentum and the confusion about that. So Admentum is the 612 program. Calvert Learning is a part of that. Their K-5 program has a different name, and it's Calvert Learning. So they're somewhat the same organization. If your student is, if you choose ASD at home for your program next year, for your model for your child, your child will be assigned the same teacher that will follow their progress throughout the year in that home ASD at home program. So I thought I'd answer just those two questions. And then if there's any other panelists that have been looking at the questions and want to speak to some of them, feel free, and I will continue to look as well. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll just start from the top, but go ahead, Angie.
Okay, there was also some questions about the amount of asynchronous versus synchronous time, or it might have been, I think the question was more around time spent on a device or computer versus time spent off the device. So Calvert and Admentum, their curriculum says that it's about 60% of the time on a device and 40% of the time off of a device, and the off device time or offline time is project-based activities that students are doing, as well as some paper pencil materials in the elementary grades. The same type of activities would be true for our hybrid model. And we are working out sort of the ratios of those two. We recognize that our youngest learners may need more time off devices and off screens. And our middle school and high school students maybe would spend a little bit more time on screens. And so that 60-40 is maybe an average or an example of how we might work that out for our hybrid model.
So if we start right from the top, there was asked about what middle and high school electives will not be offered in the hybrid model. Right now, we have not determined what will not be offered. We want to get your selections in for the learning options and offer what we can. If things are changing, if there are changes to what we can offer, we will communicate that with you. And if there's an elective that is offered that you do not want your child to opt into, then you can make a request as you would normally do through the scheduling process. When we talked about step 3 for students that are coming in, I know Shannon already mentioned that, which students would come in first to start some in-person instruction for up to 2 days. We're looking at students who are highly impacted with a special education, highly impacted with a disability and having special education services, or have second language services, English language services. There was a question about, will families, what do you recommend for students who have families that work in high-risk COVID environments? Will students be asked to do homeschooling programs? This is we will accommodate and support your children. So you need to select the learning model that's going to be best for your family and your student, and we will support your students. Angie and Robert.
There's a question, I know I'm kind of skipping around a little bit. There was a question about synchronous time, and we just want to recognize that some families in particular situations, we will need to be flexible with them. One way we're going to support families with synchronous learning time is to really try to have a consistent schedule that is the same from day to day and week to week. And so that consistent synchronous time is predictable and scheduled to support families, as well as just the student day in general. We want to really have a lot of consistency in the experience and the plan for students, so that families can rely on that routine as a way to support them.
There are also a lot of questions, and I think you said this, but I'm going to repeat, about the hybrid model and it being an 8-hour or 4 to 6 hours a day. One of the things that's really important to know, and we're committed to, and the state is committed to us meeting the traditional instructional minutes of a day. As Angie had shared with the schedule, there's going to be a combination of video or online, but also a combination of hands-on components. We do not want students to be on the screen all day long. We want this to be as engaging as possible, and have students have high quality learning experiences, and know that we need to make sure that it's a balance for students and families.
There have been a few questions about the length of the school day, and maybe some of our primary families of students in the primary grades thinking about the length of that school day. So I just wanted to name that, you know, we are absolutely having to adhere to OSPI, our state guidelines, and requirements around instructional time. In a typical school year, we have to meet a requirement of 1,027 hours of instructional time through the year, which averages out to about a little more than 5.5 hours a day of instructional time. We still have to adhere to that in this year's models. And so we are following those guidelines and trying in the scheduling to offer some flexibility to families in how they engage with the learning in different ways, projects and some activity time, even physical activity in the day, some, you know, independent reading and writing time that is sort of self-guided, as well as more guided instruction in those hours. So when we have sort of finalized schedules, we hope that you will see a balance of screens time, but also off screen, and a balance of different activities that students would engage in during the day.
So Angie, there's a lot of questions about, will students have to log on at certain times during the day? And I think we are intending on having a consistent schedule and predictable routines for students and families and staff. We also know that as we are planning and designing instruction with teachers, that there are some students that there may be some barriers, and we're working on identifying how we can accommodate students that may have barriers to some of the structures and routines in this model. Oh, the questions are moving really quickly. I was just about, somebody asked if, can we change our mind? And I lost it. Can we change our mind if we start with ASD at home and then want to move back into the hybrid model? And we want to make sure that you're, because there's very specific instructional curriculum and tools that we're using in one model versus the other. We want to make sure that if there is a transition or if there's a request, that we're looking at that on a case-by-case basis, and that we're making sure that if there is a transition, that it is at a natural point, so that students can support their learning, and that it is a natural transition for them.
So there's a few more questions about Calvert and Edmonton and families wanting more information about those before making a choice. And I will just say that I'm a parent of 4 students in the school district who will also be making this choice next week. And I have Googled Calvert and Edmonton and gone to their websites. And there is extensive information around both online, and I realize that means that I'm asking families to have some sort of internet access and a device that you can look at those on. But I just want to encourage families that really want more information about those programs beyond the course catalogs that we've shared tonight and what we've shared to go ahead and look into them. I think that many of your questions will be answered. And about those 2 programs. And I can see some people are asking specific questions that make me think that you're starting to look into those as needed. All right.
So there are some questions about, and I don't have them in front of me, but about supporting students with special education services and other services and supports. And so there is, so we are working across the board when we're, as Angie shared, with the curriculum and instructional supports for teachers. Everybody will have access to Schoology. Everybody will have access to the curriculum. And then there will be supports, and Shannon can speak to this as well, that for small group and individual, whole group, small group, and individual instruction throughout the day. And depending on students and the criteria, some students may be coming in for some portions of the day in person to be provided those services. And we'll be working with each teacher, each classroom, and each family and student to support those needs. Students, we will be supporting their learning tools, both in the ASD at home, as well as some of the tools, the online tools that have accessibility features to support accommodations and modifications. And then if there are some additional resources and supports built into students' IEPs or accommodations that are needed for students' individual education plans, then we'll be working with each of the teams as they support students in their access to instruction. Shannon, did you want to add anything else?
No, I think you got it, Becky.
There was a question, and I'm not sure we made it very clear in this particular presentation, but our district will be utilizing in the hybrid model for our across K-12, we'll be using Schoology as a learning management system. And so most of our teachers, not all, but most were using Schoology last spring. But we recognize the need to have one consistent platform across the district that all teachers are using, and that's going to support families in engaging with us and with their students learning. There will be some support for families to understand how to utilize Schoology, the parent piece of that. And so we're excited about offering that. In addition to streamlining with that one learning management system in the hybrid model, we are also, and I sort of alluded to this, but streamlining what curriculum and content students are interacting with. So in the spring, you might have experienced lots and lots of different apps and programs and lots of different ways of experiencing learning on the computer. And so we're really looking to use our district adopted curriculum and have it be consistent and much simpler in that way in this. And so this really is going to be a different experience in many ways for families in that aspect. And we're hoping to make it simpler and easier for both students and families and for teachers as well as they are creating content. We want them to be thinking about instruction and how to support families and students, and not so much be thinking about all the tools and things like that. The other questions that I've seen pop up have been some about social emotional learning and that aspect of our lives. So we recognize that students are going to need support in social emotional learning, and we will have that built in intentionally in the day across our system K-12. And we are going to be doing some intentional thinking around how to connect with families and students in a virtual world, because we know that's different than when you're in person and able to interact with each other in person. So we want you to know that that's an intentional planning piece that we're incorporating in and thinking through how to do that and do it effectively.
I want to address real quick. There's one question in here about students in the spring that were in the midst of trying to get IEPs, so the evaluation process stopped. And I just want to let everybody know, even though I'm typing a response, that when we come back to when school reopens on the 14th, whether it's in hybrid or we're not waiting until students are back on site with everybody to continue the process. September 14th is when school reopens. And at that point, our special ed teams will be reaching out to families so that we can continue that evaluation process, get those evaluations completed, and then move forward with any IEPs that are necessary.
Okay, what is the criteria for schools to be reopened to in-person training? And what do you expect elementary students with 2 working parents to be able to follow a sustainable schedule? So the criteria is based on the governor last week, at the end of last week, sent out a chart of the percentage or the number of cases per 100,000. And there's three different tiers. We are in the highest tier right now in the county. At each of those different tiers, there's different, we're able to have different opportunities for in-person activities and in-person instruction. Right now, we are not able to, we're in the highest tier, which is to provide this hybrid remote environment and also provide the ASD at home, which will continue to be throughout the year, regardless of if we're if we are able to bring students back into the school setting, the facility. And we want to work with you, and our administrators and teachers want to work with you to make sure that we can support you in being able to support student schedules. And if there are barriers, we're also, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, looking at alternative ways of providing you the content if the structured schedule if there are significant barriers to being able to access that.
Dr. Clifford, I wanted to mention there's a few questions about kindergarten, and there will be a special Q&A session on Monday evening at 5:30 to specifically speak to our parents of incoming kindergartners. And so if you have questions, additional questions related to kindergarten and just related to the program, the hybrid program for kindergarten students, I encourage you to attend on Monday evening to get more questions answered specific to that group of students.
There's a question about if kids at the high school level, if they'll be online all day in a hybrid model. And no, that's not our intention. Angie, do you want to speak to that a little bit more?
Yes, I threw out a 60-40 number that is nothing that we've actually finalized or landed on officially. And again, the details are being worked out on that, because we would like to have sort of an idea about, for planning purposes for teachers, how much time they should be spending in planning for activities that are offline versus activities that are online. But at all levels, we know that we cannot have students on devices for 6 hours a day, and that there will need to be time built in for first of all, breaks and lunch and time just away from work in general, as well as time spent doing other learning activities, such as reading books, doing writing activities and other paper pencil work. Time spent, engaging in physical activity that's directed by a PE teacher. Time doing maybe some science activities that are hands-on. Time potentially doing projects where you're building or designing or creating something. We know art is important and being creative off of a device. So all of those things are, we know we need to incorporate those into our planning for students, and that will be intentional. And we will be spending time with students in our planning every day that is not on a computer. So when you see a student day, typically a student day is about 6 hours long in a typical year. So students come to school at 9, they maybe dismiss at 3:30. In that time, every day, even in a typical year, they're outside running around for some time, or they're in transition with their peers. We know we need to build in those breaks, even when they're home. And so those are in the schedules and will be planned in, those break times, lunch times, and activity times, as well as, learning activities that are offline.
There was a question in regards to ASD at home. Will you provide parents with guidance on course selection? Yes, we will work to support parents in course selection. And there was also a question on both ASD at home and hybrid, if we're going to support students in meeting their graduation requirements in their high school and beyond planning. And yes, we will be, students will be able to access, and the instruction will be scheduled so that they can meet their high school graduation requirements in high school and beyond planning.
There are a few questions that popped up in the chat regarding just how we know when we can reopen schools and looking at what we can do, what happens if there is a possible exposure. All of this is done with Department of Health guidelines. If there is a case within the school environment that is coordinated between our school nurse, or district nurse, I should say, and the Department of Health, and they make the determination of what next steps are and that type of thing. So this isn't school decisions necessarily, as it's Department of Health guidance. And there is also a question about whether we are addressing mental health, and I am working with both mental health and counselors so that we can address needs for students and provide supports for those students that need it. If you have questions about anything, or you feel like your child should have some type of mental health support, please reach out to your building principal or myself so that we can get those services coordinated for you.
I also wanted to mention, there were some people that were asking to have maybe the access to this PowerPoint presentation after the community Q&A so that they can look a little closer at it. So I think that that's possible to make this presentation available. The schedules that are on the slides are drafts simply because we are working out the details of them, and there may be slight changes to them that would be possible moving forward. But I think that they do give a good picture. Again, if you are looking at this later, they do give a good picture of a day in the life of like what the time frames would look like, and what the learning time, the learning options would be in those different parts of the day. Again, we will be planning both online and offline learning all throughout the day. And the amount of time that is synchronous in terms of like live with teachers is still very much to be worked out. A good example might be, and it would be different depending on grade levels. So a good example might be that for our youngest learners, the amount of like live whole class time might only be about 30 minutes a day, potentially, for a morning meeting and a check-in and something like that. Teachers also, I know, will be scheduling small group and even individualized instruction, flexibly scheduling that with families and students throughout the days so that they can support the learning needs of students individually and in small groups, which is often more effective in our earlier grades anyway. And so those times are written in, but the actual like parameters around how much time that is still to be determined. And just, I want all of our attendees on this Zoom to understand that we are thinking about balancing the need to connect with our students in that way, with families, and what is the most doable for them in terms of them accessing that time.
And I just want to share, I know that there are so many questions on here, and we just will continue to answer them as we go offline, and we will post them with the FAQs. We want to have more information for you, and we are working diligently to get you as much information as we can. We got new information last week in which we had to respond to. Just this week, just 2 days ago, we got information on and guidance from the state on attendance and what that looks like to support students in engagement. And we are trying to give you as much information as we can to you so that you can make informed decisions. And I know that you have so many questions still, and we are working diligently to try to get you as much information as we can in as quick of a time frame as we can. And I want to acknowledge that we wish we had more information today, and every day we are working and on getting more details landed. When we implement one curriculum. It normally takes a year to just go through the adoption process for one curriculum. And then we take the summer to define and design what the instructional practice is going to look like for that curriculum. And we are committed to having a good instructional experience in the best way possible in a hybrid model. We all want to be back in school pre-COVID. We all want things to have students to have a normal routine where they can connect with their families and connect with their peers and their staff. And we know that we need to have a good plan, and we are working diligently so that we can get these details in place and have teachers have the resources they need, have professional development in the next 2 and 3 weeks, and have the professional and training for you all as families as you're working alongside of us and partnering with us. And we really thank you for continuing to show up to these meetings, asking us really real and honest and hard questions, and sometimes simple questions that we are working right now to answer and do have answers for. So I just wanted to thank each of you for partnering with us and understand that we are, we wish that we were in a different place, and we wish that we had much more information and could answer all of these questions right now. And we are working diligently to get as much information as possible to you as we can in a timely manner. And we just thank you for working with us, partnering with us, and continuing to stick with us. Remember that the Google surveys are going to come out on Monday, on the 17th. And we want to make sure that we had an option to connect with our kindergarten families entering in. So please join us on Monday night. And please email us. We're here to call us. We want to make sure that we are responsive to you and that we help you make the best decisions for your kiddos. And we want you to know that we're here to support you, the staff, students, families in our community. So thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to continuing to partner with you and see you virtually, and hopefully someday soon, very soon, see you in person. Thank you.